I spent $20,000 on a family vacation to the Florida Keys. But at the airport, my daughter said, "I forgot to buy you a ticket. Just go home." They planned to leave me behind from the very beginning. The next day, I had 56 missed calls. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. If I misstep today, my granddaughter will be swallowed by winter and by a woman who calls cruelty discipline, and I won't be there to warm her back to herself. The check-in agent's smile faltered when she typed my name, and nothing bloomed on her screen. The terminal was all rolling bags and fast coffees, and I was the elderly woman in a cardigan already sweating under the vents. "Try Margaret Sullivan again," I said. My voice was steady, the way you talk to a skittish horse. She checked again. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I don't have a reservation for you." Then look under my daughter's name. She booked for all of us. I tried to wave to Jessica, who had drifted toward the security rope, one eye on her watch and one on the gate clock like both owed her money. The agent found her record. "Jessica Sullivan Hayes," she read. "Party of 4. She turned the monitor slightly, the way people do when they mean kind but have to deliver a blow. 2 adults, 2 children. My stomach went as light as a paper bag. 4, not 5. I walked the few steps to Jessica. They don't see me on the booking. She dragged a hand down her face, pulling at her cheek. "Mom, I was going to tell you when. Don't do this here." She glanced toward Michael, shepherding Emma and Noah through the stanchions. "There was a mix-up. It's complicated." "It's arithmetic," I said. 4 is not 5. "We'll call you from the hotel." Jessica adjusted her backpack and shifted her shoulder like the weight of me was in it. "Go home, get some rest. It's better this way." Better for whom? She leaned in close enough for me to smell the mint she always sucked before meetings. "Don't make a scene, Mom." The scene did fine without me. Boarding lights flipped from white to red. Families clutched colorful neck garlands from the airport shops, smiling like postcards. I turned, walked back to the counter and asked the agent, the young woman with the professional smile, to tell me when that family of 4 reservation was made. "I'm not supposed to disclose booking details," she said, then looked at my face, and did. 6 weeks ago. No changes since. 6 weeks. Long after the dinners where we weighed beaches against budgets. Long after I wired the money we'd agreed. Would make it easy on everyone. If I'd been a younger woman, I might have shouted. Being older, I said thank you, picked up my carry-on, and walked out under the spinning glass doors into a wind that smelled like jet fuel and new starts. A cab ride gives you room to think. The driver, tired eyes, pair of prayer beads around the mirror, glanced at me once and said nothing. That made him my favorite kind of man. The highway unspooled like old tape. I watched Riverside roll by. Warehouses, stacked containers, the low white ribs of the harbor span. I opened my wallet to pay and saw the little photo Robert had tucked in years ago. A winter snapshot of me on a sled with Emma and Noah in hats that made them look like knit acorns. I put the wallet away and felt my jaw set. At home, the lock turned with the faithful click Robert used to call our house, sighing with relief. I left the suitcase by the hall table that still held his brass bowl of spare keys and tiny screws nobody could place, but everyone saved. In the office, everything was neat. Oak desk, 2 file cabinets, 1 landline telephone older than either of my grandkids and more reliable than any battery. The folder I needed sat in the second drawer. Trip Florida Keys in my block letters. I laid its contents on the leather blotter, the way a mechanic lays parts in order. Proof of the transfer I'd made. A glossy brochure with sunrise photos. A resort confirmation with names. Jessica's, Michael's, Emma's, Noah's, and one more. Robert's. I had buried my husband 3 years ago under a blue Vermont sky that smelled like pine gum and cold dirt. Seeing his name on a warm weather reservation bought with my money, and not mine, was a small, precision-made cruelty. The kind of meanness that calls itself organization. I dialed the resort. Coral Bay Reservations, a voice sang. How may I assist? You can cancel a booking under Sullivan Hayes, I said. My tone was even an accountant's tone. Ma'am, that is a very substantial... I understand. There is a late cancellation fee. How much? She told me a number that would have been a scandal when I made $3,300 a year on my first job. Now it was a line item. Please proceed, I said, and listened to keys click, the distant whir of a printer, the sound of a plan dying with a clean paper noise. When they arrive, I asked, what will you tell them? That the primary booking party canceled at 6:47 p.m. Eastern. Thank you, I said, and meant it for accuracy, if nothing else. The house went quiet in the honest way houses do after a necessary task. I made coffee in the percolator Robert refused to replace with anything that beeped. I poured it into his favorite mug, a blue one with a chip that sat exactly where your lower lip didn't hit, and added cream. I waited to turn my cell on until the cream bloomed to the color he called barn cat. 56 missed calls greeted me like a marching band, and a scolding. I scrolled the messages. They told a bedtime story backward. Urgency rising, politeness leaking away. The vocabulary of women who have never once wondered if a door would open for them. Only when. Call me. Not funny. Fix this. The kids are crying. And then the sentence that put its boots on my ribs. You're going to regret this. Old woman. I put the phone down and pulled a yellow legal pad toward me. Some of us still prefer graphite and paper because they obey. I wrote the time in that sentence. I underlined it once, the way my drafting teacher taught me to mark center lines. Firm, without tearing. The phone rang again. I answered. What did you do? Jessica didn't bother with hello. In the background, I could hear airport acoustics and a whine that was probably Noah, and could just as easily have been Michael. Canceled something I paid for, I said. That didn't include me. You're punishing children because your feelings got hurt. I'm teaching adults that theft wears nice shoes. How are Emma and Noah? Confused and exhausted. I'll send them postcards, I said. The Florida Keys has good ones. Pelicans that look like retired accountants. This isn't a joke. Her voice turned sharp, then slippery. Mom, we can make this right if I just what? Accept that 4 equals 5 because you're busy? Because it would have been too much for you, she said. And there it was, the cool air of her discipline. She liked a tidy life where the old didn't slow anyone down, and kids were quiet because they'd learned why they should be. We would have FaceTimed. The kids would have told you about the dolphins. I prefer my grandchildren in 3 dimensions. Then, stop making choices that keep you out of their lives. The choice that kept me out was made 6 weeks ago, I said, when you used my husband's name instead of mine. I heard Michael murmur something. The tone couples use when they think they are two-handed at the wheel. She rustled the phone. You're going to regret this, she said, anger loud now. And when we get back, there's going to be a reckoning. Write that down, I said, and did. Then I ended the call before she could. I finished my coffee, hot enough to sting my upper lip, and looked out at the maple Robert planted the year Emma was born. Its leaves were a cool quilt, every square a different green. If I failed today, if I backpedaled because I feared her anger, if I lowered my eyes to keep a little peace, I would lose Emma to the winter that lives inside Jessica's rules. I'm old enough to know which kind of cold is the worst. I made 2 more calls. The first was to a number I hadn't used since Robert and I wrote our wills. Brennan and Associates. A receptionist said, all velvet and efficiency. Patricia Brennan, please. Tell her Margaret Sullivan needs a brief consult about family and money. She put me through in under a minute, which told me something I already knew. A good attorney remembers the clients who shake her hand like a promise. Margaret, Patricia said, let me guess. You sound like a woman who has decided to do something permanent. I am, I said, and relayed the day's arithmetic in an accountant's sequence. Knowns, unknowns, constraints, acceptable tolerances. She asked 3 questions, each one mechanical in the better sense of the word. Exact, necessary, sufficient. I can have documents drafted by next week, she said. If you want a video record of competency as belt and suspenders, I can schedule it. And Margaret, her voice warmed a notch, I'm sorry. For what? That the people closest to us sometimes see a wallet where a heart is. She cleared her throat. We'll make sure your wishes can't be bullied. Thank you, I said, and we set a day. The second call was to the school secretary at Riverside Community College's foundation office. Years ago, Robert and I sat in the back row of a scholarship banquet and watched a first-generation kid take a stage she couldn't stop smiling on. He squeezed my hand so hard my knuckles popped. Now that, he whispered, is discipline. Riverside Children's Education Fund, the secretary chirped when I reached her. How can I help? I'm exploring a legacy gift, I said. Nothing to announce today. Just start a folder with my name on it. We'll speak again soon. Gladly, Mrs. Sullivan. By the time I hung up, the light in the room had shifted from late morning yellow to something more honest. The clock on the credenza ticked in perfect quarter seconds. A metronome you could govern a life by if you had the sense to keep time. I looked at the photo on the bookshelf. Me and Robert in wool hats. Breath visible. Cheeks pink. 2 slap-happy kids wedged between us like extra layers. Noah's grin too big for his face. Emma's hand clenched around my sleeve because the hill was steeper than it looked, and speed thrills and scares in equal measure. Michael texted then, as careful as a cat stepping across China. We can fix this when we're back. Think of the kids. I set the phone down face down. Thinking of the kids was exactly what I was doing. Not the kind of thinking that buys rides and souvenirs, but the kind that builds a structure you can live in. There's a difference between shelter and showcase. Women who confuse the two call cruelty discipline because it shines and has right angles. But a warm house isn't always the neatest on the street. My doorbell rang in the afternoon. Not Jessica. She was still trying to find sun where she'd planned shade. It was my neighbor Dorothy, with a piece of my mail accidentally bent into hers. Dorothy is my age and built like an upright freezer. We stood in the doorway and talked weather because women our age have earned the right to mean more than we say. You look like a woman who made a decision, she said, as she handed me a glossy charity circular. I did, I said. I'm calling an attorney. Good, she said, a single syllable with the weight of poured concrete. Dorothy once told her daughters she wouldn't bankroll a single bad habit. They grew up liking her anyway. At dusk, I fried an egg and burned the toast the way I always have since Robert stopped fixing what I scorched. I ate at the little kitchen table that still has the one leg I shim with a folded grocery list. When you've been married long enough, imperfections are how you know you're home. The phone stayed off for supper. When I turned it back on, there were more messages. Some of them oiled for persuasion, some of them shaped like clubs. The last one was a soft cry from Emma, a message Michael surely pressed send on to make me feel. Grandma, we saw a big bird with a throat like a coin purse. Her voice brightened. I'm going to draw it when I get home so you can see. I'll pin it to my wall, I told the empty kitchen. Then I opened the drawer where Robert kept stamps and scotch tape and found a postcard from a box we'd never finished. A pelican balanced on a piling, neck hunched, eye patient. I wrote 2 notes in block letters so Emma could read my printing without help. Emma, pelicans can hold more fish than their bellies. This is a true fact. Draw me a picture and we'll compare beaks. Love, Grandma. Noah, a coin purse throat is called a gula pouch. Sounds like a dinosaur, doesn't it? Love, Grandma. I addressed them and set them by the door. A woman can lose a battle and still know which way the war is won. Before bed, I did what I have done for years when my mind won't quiet. I walked the house and touched what mattered. The door jamb where we used to pencil the kids' heights. The armrest of Robert's reading chair, smooth from his palm. The edge of my desk where my wedding ring tapped for 4 decades, while I thought through problems nobody else had the patience for. On the desk, the legal pad waited, the sentence bold enough to see across the room. "You're going to regret this, old woman." Women who say that to their mothers never learned the only discipline that sticks, the kind you put on yourself. When I finally lay down, the mattress sighed like the house. Outside, a neighborhood cat made its rounds. In here, I listened to the clock until it turned from ticking to tide. If I failed today, I would lose my granddaughter to the cold of rooms where warmth is withheld as a lesson. Of a woman who thinks love is a strict face and a raised voice. I did not fail. I changed the weather. In the morning, I'll drive to Riverside Station and mail 2 postcards. I'll stop by the notary for a form Patricia wants me to sign, because belt and suspenders has never once made a woman look foolish. And if Jessica calls again, I'll let the machine do what it was built for. I'm an accountant by trade and temperament. When a structure loads wrong, you don't curse the beams. You draw a better plan and build it clean, so the children can live inside it without shivering. The morning after the airport, I drove to Riverside Station with the postcards tucked in the breast pocket of my jacket, where a woman keeps the things she means to actually do. The station smells like old wood and machine oil and coffee burned brave. I slipped the cards to the clerk, young nose ring, hands inked with vines, and asked for 2 stamps with birds on them if she had any. "We have cranes," she said, and smiled as if that solved a problem. It did. Outside, the day had the clean chill that makes a woman's lungs feel sharpened. I walked to the corner box and mailed the cards the way you plant bulbs, quietly, with faith in the return. Then I went home and got serious. Paper shields are made the same way you build a good bridge. You begin at the abutments, and you don't pretend a shortcut won't drop you in the river. On the desk, I laid out a new legal pad, the kind with the red margin and the faintly toothy paper that takes pencil well. I drew a box around the date and wrote 4 headings, 1 on each line beneath it. House, health, money, kids. I put a check mark next to the first, because the hinges and locks were sound enough. The others were more interesting. I started with money because arithmetic speaks a language women like my daughter respect, even when they pretend they don't. I printed my bank statements, highlighted the wire I'd sent for the trip, and stapled the proof to a fresh sheet labeled Coral Bay Wire, Return Demand. I wrote out what any fair person would consider obvious. Funds given for a family trip that did not include the giver should be returned. Not out of spite, out of balance. By 9, I was in Patricia Brennan's office, which looks exactly like what you want from a woman who's about to put bones in your plans, so they stand up to wind. Books, good lamps, a view that reminds you life goes on. She had a camera on a small tripod. She apologized for belt and suspenders. "Margaret," she said, "a video record stating you know who you are, where you are, what you're doing, and why." "Do I have to hold today's newspaper?" I asked. She laughed the way women our age laugh when the joke is near the bone. We recorded in 1 take. Full name, today's date, my address. I named my grandchildren, and the school Emma's musical about bees will be at in the spring, because competency lives in small details, not Latin. I explained in plain words that I was updating my will and trust, because certain recent events clarified my priorities. "I want to make sure," I said to the lens, "that the people I love are warmed by my life, not burned by anyone else's idea of tidiness." Patricia nodded at the screen like a satisfied carpenter, then slid a stack of papers toward me. "Drafts," she said. "We'll finalize after you sleep on them. But this will hold for now. A revocable living trust with new provisions that made sense to a woman who's watched more than one plan topple because somebody leaned on the wrong spar. A no-contest clause with teeth, not poetry. A durable power of attorney naming a professional fiduciary instead of any relative. A healthcare directive that said in 13 short pages what Robert and I used to say to each other at the kitchen table by pointing at our coffee and saying, "When I can't drink this with you, you'll know. The demand letter to your daughter," Patricia added, "is simple and unadorned. Return of funds by a date certain. All further contact through counsel. I've kept adjectives out of it." She tapped the page. "Adjectives are for speeches, not instructions." In the lobby, I paid the retainer and shook her hand, while we looked each other in the eye long enough to say everything polite women don't say. Outside, Riverside's light had gone from winter gray to the brighter kind that makes cars look freshly washed, even when they aren't. At the bank, a woman my age with a brooch shaped like a thimble led me to a glass-walled office. "My husband says he can find any screw that ever fell into a heat register," she said, patting the brooch. "He's wrong." "I'll be sure to tell him the truth if we meet," I said, and we smiled like neighbors. I changed the Pardee beneficiaries on 2 accounts to the education fund Robert and I had talked about when we were young enough to think scholarships fell from the sky like rain. I closed a convenience account I'd opened years ago in a moment of misplaced optimism that a monthly cushion might soften Jessica's temper. "Any recent activity?" I asked. "2 transfers this fall?" she said, and named amounts that had felt small enough at the time to ignore. "Do you want printouts?" "I want the kind of printouts a careful woman keeps," I said. She produced them with an efficiency that made the paper warm. I rented a safe deposit box because metal and time are friends, and slid in the 3 things I would not have anyone mistake for negotiable. The little tape of Robert's voice, reading Emma, blueberries for Sal, when she had a cold, my mother's teaching certificate with the number stamped proud and the original deed to the house. I left copies at home. By lunch, I'd done more with pens and stamps than some women do with shouting. I walked to the diner near the hardware store and ordered soup that tasted like someone's grandmother still stood at the stove. Dorothy came in while I was sopping broth with rye bread. "You switching out locks?" she asked, seeing the little paper bag from the hardware shop on the bench beside me. "Just ending a spare key era," I said. "No hard feelings. New rules." "Good," she said the single syllable again, and I wondered how many daughters her one-word approval had trained to keep their hands off what wasn't theirs. After lunch, I changed the deadbolts. It's a simple job that feels like finishing a sentence correctly. The new keys made that solid, satisfying thunk when you turn them. A promise, not a threat. I taped one in a small envelope with Dorothy's name on it and walked it across the street. "For emergencies," I said. "The real kind." She slid it into her pocket like a coin and didn't give me a speech about community because women our age don't need the speech. At 2, a police cruiser rolled in front of my house and idled. 2 officers stepped out, a young woman and a man with hair too neat to be anything but new. They rang the bell politely, the way professionals do when they're not here to scare you. "Mrs. Sullivan?" the woman asked when I opened the door. "Yes," I said, and stepped back so they could see a tidy living room, a clock that keeps time, and a woman in a cardigan who had buttered her toast that morning and not forgotten to turn off the stove. "We had a call requesting a welfare check," she said. "A family member was concerned you hadn't been answering your phone." "I turned it off to use my hands for something besides arguing," I said, "because there's no point pretending with adults. You're welcome to have a look around if it eases anyone's mind." They didn't snoop. They stood in the doorway and did what good officers do. They let their eyes rest on the things that tell the truth. Books stacked spine out, a pencil by the phone. The smell of coffee not too old. The young man spotted the legal pad on the desk. He didn't read, but he noticed the lines and the structure, the way one notices a good joint in wood. "Do you have someone you can call if you need help?" the woman asked. "I do," I said and handed her Patricia's card. And here's mine. If my daughter calls again with concern, feel free to let her know you saw me upright and organized. We can't disclose details, she said, but she slid the card into her pocket the way people do when they plan to actually use something. You seem fine, Mrs. Sullivan. I am, I said. Drive safe. I've replaced my deadbolts today, and I'd like to think we all improved something. When the door shut, the house took a long breath. I wrote, welfare check, 2:07 p.m. Officers polite. No issues. On the legal pad and underlined it once. Then I turned the phone on. Messages bloomed like mold in the warm. Michael had sent a paragraph that tried to be a bridge, and mostly was a net. We're all stressed. The kids are asking why you're mad. Please don't do anything rash. We love you. A minute later from Jessica, a photo of the resort confirmation now stamped, cancelled like a bruise, followed by, you'll pay for what you did. And then, because she can't help reaching for a lever when she sees one, I've made some calls. You're not well. People will see that. I forwarded both to Patricia without comment. She called immediately. Don't reply directly, she said. Our letter goes out this afternoon by email and certified mail. Returning funds is not optional. We also note that any further welfare checks or third-party contacts intended to harass will be documented. I had a pleasant chat with the officers, I said. I may bake them a pie next time. Good, she said, and I could hear her smile. Also, I'd like you to see your primary care doctor this week. Not because I have doubts, because paper shields work best when they overlap. Already on my list, I said, tapping health on the legal pad. I'll ask her to write a short note. Oriented, independent, understands decisions. Perfect. So 3, I called the clinic and booked a same-week appointment. The receptionist called me Hun, in a way that would get a teenager sent to sensitivity training, and gets a woman my age to show up early with a folder. I printed a 1-page summary of medications and wrote, no changes, because the pharmacy knows what I take better than my daughter does. I added, vaccinations current, and drives only in daylight, because truth is a better defense than any adjective. With the grown-up work in motion, I did a smaller task that felt bigger than it looked. I took Robert's address book from the drawer, found the line with Sullivan, Hayes, Jessica, and Michael, and drew a neat line through the word key, where I'd penciled it years ago. Next to it, I wrote, call first. I did not draw through their names. Paper shields are not walls. They are weatherproofing. A door can still be a door. Near dusk, a delivery van dropped a certified letter on my mat, as if it were hot. Inside, a note from a financial consultant I'd met once at a barbecue, friend of my daughter's, offering to help me structure my estate to reduce confusion for the family. He'd enclosed a brochure with smiling gray-haired people pointing at graphs. I put it under amusing in the file basket and wrote no reply on the legal pad. I would have preferred a brisk game of checkers with a woman who tells the truth. The day's last call was from Emma, from Michael's phone. Grandma, she said, breathless. Did you know a pelican's mouth can hold 3 times more than its stomach? I did, I said. And I also know your drawing looks like it might be better than the photograph on my postcard. You got it? I did, I said. I mailed 2 this morning. Did Noah tell you the name of the throat pouch? She giggled. Gula pouch. He says it like a dinosaur name. Tell him dinosaurs would be lucky to have a pouch like that, I said. And tell him I have a book for him about birds that steal fish from each other without saying, please. I will read it to both of you when you come over. We'll practice saying gular until the cat runs from us. Michael came on then soft. Thank you for the cards, he said. It meant a lot. We'll talk when we're back. When you're ready, I said, and left it there. We both understand grammar well enough to know subject and object can swap places if a person keeps listening. After supper, eggs again, Unburned this time. I sat at the desk and went through the stack one more round. Demand letter drafted, trust revised, powers named, locks changed, doctor booked, welfare check documented. A plan beginning to look like a structure, the kind that doesn't sway when a woman with a temper leans on it. I took out the photo of Robert and me in the wool hats. He's squinting at me because I'd said something about the cold that made no sense, and he loved me enough to call nonsense by its name. I set it by the lamp and let the light find his cheek the way it used to. When the phone buzzed again, I let the machine catch it. Jessica's voice came through flat and hard. "You've embarrassed yourself," she said. "You've embarrassed me. You want to play legal games? Fine, I'll see your lawyer and raise you a judge. Keep your phone on. Things are going to move fast." I pressed save and wrote, "Threat of litigation, 7:41 p.m. It read like an accountant's note about a load exceeding a safe limit. Patricia's email arrived 3 minutes later with a copy of the demand letter attached, and a single line, "Sent." It was the nicest past tense I'd seen in months. Before bed, I laid the new keys on the dish by the door where Robert used to drop loose change. I walked the rooms the same as the night before, touching the house's small truth-tellers. I paused at the door jamb, where Emma's latest mark is taller than last summer's, and Noah's is angling up like a rocket that hasn't decided its exact mission. I put my fingers on the new deadbolt and felt the precise craftsmanship of an object built to turn exactly as far as it should, and stop. If the first day had been the jolt that told me which way was up, this day was the quiet tilting of the keel back to level. Paper isn't armor, but it is law, and law is just us agreeing out loud what we owe each other. Women like my daughter pretend the rules are for slowing down other people's cars. Women like me know a speed limit is a mercy. Tomorrow I'll see my doctor and pick up a pie for the officers on my way home. I'll start a folder labeled Kids and put in it exactly 2 things. The postcard Emma sent back when it comes, and a copy of the new trust paragraph that says what Robert and I meant when we chose to make our lives quiet on purpose. That our love goes to the children as warmth first, and only then, if there's anything left, as wood to burn. At 8 sharp, I sat on the paper of my doctor's exam table, shoes lined heel to heel below me like obedient dogs. Dr. Chen has been listening to my lungs long enough to know the difference between a wheeze and a worry. She asked me to name the month, then the last 4 presidents. She asked if I knew where I was. I told her Riverside Clinic, room 3, where the clock on the wall runs 30 seconds fast, where the poster about flu shots has a typo in the second bullet that makes me itch to fix it with a pen. She smiled. Orientation intact. She took my blood pressure the way Robert used to fold a bedsheet. Firm, efficient, kind. We talked about the winter ahead, my knees, whether I remembered to take the small walk after dinner. I handed her a 1-page summary I'd printed. Medications, vaccinations, the fact that I do not drive after dark. She made a note and then another. "You want a letter for your file?" she said, as if I'd asked it out loud. "Yes." I didn't add why. People like Dr. Chen know why. She dictated while I watched her tidy handwriting walk across the page. Patient is oriented to person, place, time, and situation. Independent in activities of daily living. No evidence of cognitive impairment on examination. She signed with the little flourish she saves for documents that will have to stand up to weather. Put the paper in a hard plastic sleeve because some things deserve armor even inside a file. On the way home, I bought a pie for the officers who'd done a welfare check without theater. "Apple or cherry?" the girl behind the bakery counter asked. "Which one tastes like someone meant it?" I said. "Cherry," she said without thinking. I respect a person who knows the answer before the question is finished. I'd agreed to meet them, Jessica and Michael, for lunch. "Neutral location," Patricia had said. "Public daytime short. We chose the restaurant that tries to look like it's been there 50 years. It hasn't. But the meatloaf is honest." I arrived early and chose a table with my back to the wall and a clear view of the door. Habit from a lifetime of solving problems. You can see if you bother to look. They walked in together, flanked by Emma and Noah like bookends. Noah's hair was sticking up in a way that says he'd been told not to touch it and couldn't quite help it. Emma pressed a folded piece of paper to her chest, like a secret. "For Grandma," she said, and then looked at her parents before deciding how much joy was allowed. I stood and she hugged me quick and sharp, the way small people hug when they know hugs have become political. Noah shuffled, then leaned his shoulder into my hip. His version. "Thank you for the postcards," Michael began, sitting, voice pitched to the tone couples use when they're trying to land a plane in rough air. "The kids loved them." "I'm glad," I said. I nodded to the server and ordered coffee because it gives a woman something to hold besides her temper. "We're here to talk about what happened at the airport," Jessica said. She didn't take off her coat. "I am too," I said. Emma slid the paper across to me. A pelican, absurd and perfect, beak like an umbrella. "I tried," she said. "Gular pouch," she said, pronouncing it like she'd practiced in the mirror. "I'm framing this," I said. "Smithsonian quality." Noah had a band of yellowing on his wrist, the kind you get when a rubber band has been worn too long. He tucked it under the table when he saw me see it. I filed the fact the way an accountant files load data. Not as drama, but as a number that will matter if the bridge ever gets crowded. "Mom," Jessica said, elbows planted, voice clearing a path. "We have to set some expectations." She unfolded a packet from her leather folder. Slick covers, tabs, the kind of thing women bring to show they've done their homework. "You've made a lot of impulsive decisions this week. Canceling the hotel, calling around, changing accounts. It's not safe." "Unsafe for what?" I asked. "For you," she said, and the word was a coat she was offering that would fit her better than me, and frankly, for the family. "We," she put a hand on Michael's forearm like he needed to be steadied, "have spoken to someone. A consultant," Michael added. "She knows elder law." "That's fortunate," I said. "So does my lawyer," Jessica pushed on. "We've prepared a simple power of attorney. Springing. It would give me the ability to handle your financial affairs if you get, confused. It's routine. Everybody does it." She slid a document toward me. The signature line had a neat little X as if my hand would need a map to find it. "You prepared this," I said. "Before or after the tickets were booked without me?" "Mom," she said, warning in the syllable. "My attorney advised me," I said, "not to sign anything at lunch." I took a sip of coffee, let it mark time. "But I appreciate the effort." "Margaret," Michael said, a softness that wasn't fake so much as strategic. "We're trying to simplify things. The house is big. You're alone. A move to a community, at least a wait list." "Not today," I said. Noah reached for a salt shaker, then drew his hand back fast. He looked at me, then at his mother, then at the ceiling. Some children learn weather before they learn words. Emma fished in her backpack and produced a library book about shorebirds. She held it halfway to me, then pulled it back when Jessica cleared her throat. She sat on her hands the way Robert used to when he wanted to stop himself from fixing someone else's problem. "We're worried you're being influenced," Jessica said, "by people who don't have the family's best interests at heart." "An attorney, a physician, a baker who sold me a cherry pie?" I asked. "That's my current conspiracy." "This isn't funny," she snapped, and the tableware went bright with attention. "You are not well." "Dr. Chen believes otherwise," I said, and laid her letter beside my coffee. It looked small and extremely heavy. Jessica barely glanced. "We already have a letter." She produced one from her packet, signature scrolled by a doctor whose practice address resolved to a website that advertises convenience. "Concerns for impaired judgment. Recommend further evaluation. Family reports increasing confusion." The kind of letter you can buy when you pay enough to skip the waiting room. "We're filing for temporary guardianship," she said, as if announcing a sensible weather forecast. "It's better to be honest about it. If you sign the POA, we can avoid court." Michael looked stricken for a second. A card he couldn't catch. He hadn't wanted to show me all the cards today. But Jessica liked an open table if she thought she'd stack the deck. "Mom, this isn't an attack," she said. "It's protection." "Paper can protect," I said, tapping my sleeve where Dr. Chen's note rested. "Or it can be a weapon." I put both letters side by side. One smelled like a room where people take their shoes off. The other smelled like a printer in a hurry. The kids took that moment to argue in whispers about whether pelicans were lazy or efficient. Michael placed a hand lightly on Noah's shoulder. He flinched the way a person does when a hand means stop, more than it means steady. My coffee cooled by the thickness of a silence that didn't belong in a family. The server approached with our plates, followed, perfect theater, by a man in a blue windbreaker carrying a stiff envelope. "Margaret Sullivan?" he asked, eyes on the name. Not my face. "Yes." He handed me the envelope with the choreography of someone who does one thing for a living. "You've been served." "By whom?" I asked, although the return address printed through the paper like a bruise already told me. "By your daughter," the man said kindly, as if he was delivering a weather report we could all dress for. He left before the meatloaf cooled. Emma stared at the envelope as if it might hiss. Noah traced the seam of the table with his finger, following the grain because it moved the way he knew he couldn't. Michael whispered, "Jessica." In that way spouses do when they're hoping the one they chose will change into someone kinder because they said their name softly enough. "It's the right thing," Jessica said, but I watched her eyes flick to the windows, gauging how this looked from outside. Women who live on image are cursed to reflect. I slid the envelope into my bag without opening it. "Lunch is over," I said, because an accountant should know when a structure can't bear another fork set down on it. "Emma, your Pelican's goulash pouch may be the best one I've seen in years. Noah, when you read the word out loud, stretch the U until your mother laughs." She almost did. Then she remembered not to. "Grandma," Emma said fast before anyone could regulate her, "can we still come over for cocoa this weekend?" Jessica cut in. "We'll see," she said. "Things are complicated." "They are," I agreed. "But cocoa is not." I paid the bill, left a tip that said, "We're not the difficult table," and walked them to the door. Outside, the winter sun tried hard and failed, which is still trying. Michael squeezed my hand quickly when Jessica was helping Noah with his zipper. "I didn't know about today," he whispered. "Maybe I did. I wasn't ready to know." "Get ready," I said, but not unkindly. Back home, I placed the envelope on the kitchen table and looked at it the way you look at a crack in a foundation. Calmly, closely, with a pencil in your hand. Then I called Patricia. "Open it," she said. "Read the first page out loud." The petition alleged confusion, impulsivity, financial self-harm, vulnerability to scammers, social isolation. It cited erratic behavior, including canceling a family trip without cause. It requested temporary control of my finances and medical decisions. And this was the hinge: limited contact with minor grandchildren pending evaluation. "That last line," Patricia said when I paused, "is the tell." "They're drawing a circle around the kids," I said, "and cutting me out because they know your love is leverage." She said, "Good news, this is beatable. Better news, you did the homework. Dr. Chen's letter, your competence video, the neatness of your week. Courts like neat." They also filed an online doctor's note. "I've seen that boilerplate," she said. "Judges have too. We'll file a response, a motion to deny ex parte relief, and a request for sanctions if they keep at the welfare checks and surprise process servers. Do not contact your daughter about this directly. Do not argue on the phone. If you see them, be courteous and brief. Let the paper talk. What about Emma and Noah? I asked. Keep being grandma in 3 dimensions, she said. We're not going to hand them a narrative that says you weaponized them, but we will be ready if the petition tries to use them as shields. After the call, I opened a new folder and wrote Court on the tab. Then I started a second one and wrote Kids in it. I placed Emma's pelican inside because a woman ought to remember what she's fighting for when the language gets legal. At 4, the officers rang the bell. The same pair. The cherry pie sat on the counter like a peace treaty. Mrs. Sullivan, the woman officer said. We received another call. Same concern. I saw the weather coming, I said. Do you like cherry? They did. I cut 2 generous slices, and we ate them standing at the counter in the crisp light that makes crumbs seem like a moral failing. They did their scan with their eyes again, relaxed the way people do in a house that hums instead of buzzes. Ma'am, the young man said, gesturing to the legal pad on the table, now titled, Today, served with bullet points beneath. My grandmother writes lists like that. She says it keeps the wolves in the right forest. She's not wrong, I said. When they left, I copied Dr. Chen's letter and slid the original into the safe deposit folder to take to the bank tomorrow. I printed a calendar of court deadlines Patricia had emailed, dates in boxes, boxes in order. I ironed a shirt because a courtroom is a place that respects pressed collars, even if it pretends not to notice. The phone buzzed, a text from a number I didn't recognize. If you want this to go away, sign POA. No more drama. I forwarded it to Patricia, who responded with the legal equivalent of a dry chuckle. Block and archive. Dusk turned the maple outside into lace. I made cocoa for myself the way I make it for the kids. Milk, not water. A pinch of salt because Robert said so. Cinnamon if you're feeling showy. I drank it at the small kitchen table and looked at the envelope's contents again, until they lost their ability to raise my pulse. When I turned the page with the limited contact clause, I noticed a sentence about unpredictable discipline in my presence. Unpredictable. Discipline is the kind women like Jessica call teaching them a lesson when what they mean is making the room colder to prove they control the thermostat. I thought of Noah's wrist. I thought of the way he flinched before a hand even landed. I set my cup down, stood, and walked the house. There is a distance between 2 points on any plan that the draftsman labels unknown until a measurement proves it. Today moved one of those points. Lunch had been the attempted bridge. The service at the table was the river the bridge couldn't cross. This doesn't mean there's no way over. It means you don't keep driving where there's no road. I stood by the bookshelf where Robert's photo leans. A winter day. 2 kids crammed into a sled that looks like it was built the year I learned more from my mistakes than my successes. Middle distance, I said to the empty room. The space where you can't see the finish line yet. But you know exactly where you started and you've remembered why your feet are moving. On my desk, I wrote 3 sentences on a fresh page, labeled Boundaries. No meetings without a witness. No calls without a record. No signing anything that uses the word simple. Then, under kids, I wrote, call school counselor. Confirm pickup permissions. Invite for cocoa when safe. I dialed the elementary school and left a message for the counselor. An old woman's voice steady as a level, asking for a time to talk about 2 children she loved. No accusations, only concern and the wish to stay on the right side of every rule. I printed the district policy on grandparent pickup and highlighted the line about parental controls and school discretion in emergencies. A woman doesn't build a raft without reading the river. By the time I switched off the kitchen light, the house had done that thing again, where it forgives you for the day you made it hold. I set Emma's drawing on the mantel. I slid Noah's name under a magnet on the fridge, the one shaped like a brown bear that Robert used to insist was a moose, and I used to insist was a bear, because being married means sometimes you agree on the shape of a creature by agreeing it's lovable either way. The petition lay on the table, weighty and thin. The plan in my head settled like sand after a wave. Tomorrow the lawyer will file. Tomorrow the bank will copy. Tomorrow, if I hear the word discipline spoken like a threat, I'll be ready to call it by its right name. A woman in her late 60s does not win against time. She wins against hurry. She wins against silence. She wins sometimes by deciding that a bridge is not the only way across. On maps of old logging country, a fire break is a raw strip of earth bulldozed through trees, so that when the flame runs, it runs out of food. You don't make one because you like the look. You make one because the wind has changed. The wind changed at 9:12 a.m. Mrs. Sullivan, this is Mr. Davis from Riverside Elementary. Do you have a minute? His voice was practiced calm, the kind that puts its hand on your shoulder without squeezing. I said yes and sat down with my legal pad, because a pencil straightens a spine better than anyone gives it credit for. Emma had a hard morning, he said. She's safe with me right now. I'd like to meet briefly, not to alarm, just to plan. 10 minutes, I said. I'll bring my better manners. The school counselor's office was the color of crayons and the size of a pantry. 2 chairs for adults, beanbag for small catastrophes. On his desk, a jar of sea glass, a sand timer, tissues that mercifully stayed in the box. Emma was not in the room. Good. He'd said she was with the librarian, which meant a supervised quiet that didn't feel like punishment. I saw her wrist, he said after we shook hands. No adjectives, just those 4 words laid carefully on the table between us. She told me it was from a rubber band she forgot to take off. I've also noticed some flinching when voices get sharp, which could be many things and could be nothing. We do not jump to conclusions here, but we do our jobs, which is to keep the fire from finding kindling, I said. He smiled a little. We call it safety planning. I gave him the smallest version of the family mess that still told the truth. Lunch, the envelope, the petitions line about limited contact, the word discipline being used like a thermostat. I'm not here to accuse, I said. I'm here to make sure professionals see what they should see, and that a grandmother doesn't trample any fences she's supposed to stay behind. Good, he said. Because grandparents who accuse get tuned out. Grandparents who observe help. He asked permission to document what I'd reported. I nodded. He clicked his pen once and wrote with neat loops. Then he asked if I would be comfortable if he called our county's hotline for mandated reporters. I would be relieved, I said. And I will sit quietly while you do it, he dialed. He described, not dramatized. A wrist, a flinch. A child who startles at hands that mean to steady. He mentioned family stress. A pending court petition, a grandparent present and calm. He listened, said yes twice, then understood, which is a word counselors use when they're told to say less than they feel. They'll send an officer to take a brief statement and just ensure we're all on the same page, he said when he hung up. Emma will finish her library time. I will keep her here until the officer has eyes on. I will also call both parents, because the law cares about that, even when it makes the day harder. He called Michael first. I could hear relief leak through the phone. He called Jessica next. The air in the room cooled in the way air does when someone on the other end prefers control to information. She's on her way, he said when he set the handset down. Please do not engage if she tries to make this a family meeting. I make a good statue, I said, and folded my hands. The officers who arrived were the pair who'd stood in my kitchen eating cherry pie the day before. Continuity is a blessing. The young man nodded to me as if we were neighbors who share a snowblower. The woman thanked Mr. Davis for the call, the way professionals thank each other when the process works. They asked to speak to Emma where she felt comfortable. She chose the library. Sensible girl. They went. We stayed listening to the clock in the hallway tick its brave little seconds. That's when Jessica came in, fast enough to make the doorway look smaller. She wore a coat that says, I make decisions, and a face that says her decisions are their own weather. I'm taking my daughter, she said. Not hello. Mrs. Sullivan is here at my request, Mr. Davis said, very even. She is not here to remove anyone. Please lower your voice. My child, she said, softer, but not better. You have school business with me, he said, and for the next 20 minutes, you have county business with those officers. After that, you may sign your child out if the officers see no immediate safety concerns. Until then, you may sit in the hall and take a breath. She turned her head toward me without moving her body, a trick women in boardrooms practice so often it becomes their resting posture. What did you tell them? What I've seen, I said, and what I haven't. Don't get poetic, she said. You're not good at it. It would have been a fine line if it hadn't been wielded like a stick. I said nothing. The officers came back with Emma and did something smart. They spoke to Jessica first, out of Emma's earshot, so the girl didn't have to watch adults choose sides. Ma'am, the woman officer said, we need you to sit in the office while we talk to your daughter privately, and then we'll all talk together if that seems appropriate. I'm not agreeing to. It isn't an agreement, she said. It's a process. Women like my daughter hate process. They prefer outcomes they chose before breakfast. But process has uniforms. She sat in the library. Through the glass, I watched Emma answer questions with a librarian beside her, turning pages that had nothing to do with what was being asked. The young officer held the sand timer from Mr. Davis's desk and tipped it once, as if to show the girl that no one here was in a hurry to answer for her. After a few minutes, Emma rubbed her wrist and said something that made the officer look at Mr. Davis with that slight turn of the head professionals use for, "Did you hear what I heard?" They returned. The woman officer kept her voice level. "Emma is okay to go home from school like any other day," she said. "We are not making an emergency removal today. We will write up our notes and forward to CPS for follow-up. Mr. Davis has documented. Thank you for calling. Ma'am," she turned to Jessica, "Emma mentioned a rubber band. Rubber bands aren't discipline tools. Please refrain. That's not an order. It's advice. I can parent my child," she said. "We'll assume good intent," she said. "And we'll verify. Verification is a lovely word. It takes heat out of a room and lets light do the work." While Jessica signed Emma out, Mr. Davis leaned toward me. "I cannot decide custody," he whispered. "I can only choose caution." "You did," I said. "And the building didn't burn." Michael arrived late, winded. He'd come for Noah. While he signed, he met my eyes. There was apology, and there was something harder. Resolve's first edge. "I got here as fast as I could," he said. "You're here," I said. "That's the whole sentence." Jessica reappeared with Emma, and an attempt at humility that didn't fit her. "We're fine," she said to the room. "Thank you for your concern." "Of course," Mr. Davis said, which is what a civilized person says instead of "you're welcome," when "you're welcome" would taste like victory. They left. Michael waited a beat, then came back around the desk. "I'm taking the kids to my sister's tonight," he said, voice low. "We need less temperature." "That's a good thermostat," I said. "May I bring cocoa another night?" "Let's see after the weekend," he said, and it didn't feel like a door closing. It felt like weather changing within manageable limits. In the parking lot, I called Patricia. "Firebreak," I said. "Explain." I told her the sequence. Wrist, call, officers, rubber band, no removal. A report opened. She asked 3 questions with nouns only. Then she said, "We pivot. I'll file a limited-purpose motion this afternoon. No corporal punishment in the children's presence. Of any adult against any child. Pending hearing. Judges like bright lines. We'll also ask for a no-removal order. No taking the kids out of county without notice. It's less than a custody grab. It's a safety rail. Will we get it? Depends on the judge, she said, and the weather. But the welfare check at school helps. Mr. Davis will fax his note if I ask nicely. So will the officers, at least their incident number. Officer Martinez and Officer Hale, I said. Good people. They like cherry pie. Who doesn't? She said. Email me their names anyway. Back home, I printed a one-page statement for Patricia. Dates, phrases, who said what, no adjectives. I scanned Dr. Chen's letter again so I could send a clean copy to CPS if they asked. I called the bank to confirm the safe deposit appointment. While the copier clacked, I did a small thing that felt larger than it looked. I took a rubber band from the desk drawer and dropped it into the trash. Then, because symbolism is useless if it's only private, I took the other rubber bands and did it again. I kept one for the morning paper. Even in a fire break, you still need to hold something together. At noon, the court calendar updated. Patricia sent a screenshot. The guardianship petition was set for a status conference 2 weeks out. Our motion for safety rails was marked to be heard on submission, which meant paper first. Argument only if the judge wanted a show. I like that, I said. Paper behaves. Dorothy knocked. They had cruisers at the school, she said in the tone of a woman who doesn't gossip, but believes in neighbors knowing about weather patterns. Everything all right? Better than it might have been, I said. Want to help me carry 2 boxes to the car? One for the bank, one for the kids. She took the heavier one. What's in the lighter? Picture frames, I said. I'm going to put Emma's pelican in something with glass, and I have a book for Noah about birds who steal fish without saying please. You always did like to fight with metaphors, Dorothy said. I like to build with them, I said. Fighting is just bad carpentry. On the way to the bank, I stopped at a pharmacy and bought 2 heat packs and a small, ridiculous pair of wool socks printed with snowmen. I am not a woman who can change a thermostat in a stranger's house, but I can slip warmth into a backpack that looks like it belongs. There, I wrote the school a note requesting permission to leave the items at the nurse's office with no drama and no signature. Needed. Mr. Davis approved with a smiley face drawn like a secret. At the bank, I slid Dr. Chen's original letter into the safe deposit folder and stood a second longer than needed in that small, tiled room where quiet has a sound. Metal drawers, keys that turn exactly to their detent. When you are building a fire break, you put your documents where sparks can't find them. By 3, Patricia had filed. She sent me our motion and a proposed order. No corporal punishment. No removal from county without 72 hours' notice. No disparagement of any party in front of the children. 3 lines that look like guardrails on a narrow road, she called. I also emailed opposing counsel. She said, yes, your daughter hired someone. I kept it civil. I proposed a voluntary stipulation with the same terms if they want to show they're reasonable. Will they? Your daughter might not. Her lawyer might. At 4, the officers stopped by again, this time off the clock, in their coats, a pie tin wrapped in foil under the young man's arm. You didn't have to, I said, opening the door. Neither did you, the woman officer said. We wanted to tell you we filed our note and remind you, don't carry this alone. I have a lawyer, I said. A doctor, a school counselor, a neighbor who lifts as much as I let her. That's more hands than most bridges get. Good, she said, and looked past me at the legal pad on the table, titled Firebreak, Today. She read the bullets without moving her lips, the way we all do when we know we shouldn't be reading but hope the words will be kind. At dusk, Michael texted, We're at my sister's. The kids are asleep. Thank you for not turning today into a war. Thank Miss Davis. I wrote back. And the librarian, and whoever decided libraries should have carpet, I added. Tell Emma the rubber band trick doesn't fool accountants. We've all had a wrist at one time or another. A minute later, he said, She said to tell you the snowman socks are ridiculous. She loves them. I put the kettle on. Cocoa, for one, is not a tragedy. It is rehearsal. While the milk warmed, I called the school again and left a thank you message in the general box. I said my name and my gratitude. I said that adults who do boring things properly save more lives than heroes. I said that if anyone needed a new sand timer, I could build one out of a mason jar and precision sand I'd kept from a job site a lifetime ago. When the phone buzzed again, it was Patricia. "Judge put a pin in it," she said. "Proposed order entered pro tem. Temporary pending hearing next week. It's something." "It's a line cut through trees," I said. "Ugly, but it might save the house." "Precisely," she said. "Get some rest, Margaret. Rest is not the same as peace, but it's the scaffold you build peace on. I walk the house because that's what I do when I don't want to let the day boss me." I touched the door jamb, the armrest of Robert's chair, the desk edge worn to a satin I didn't know wood could learn. I set Emma's pelican in a cheap frame for now and leaned it on the mantel where the light could catch its eye. On the legal pad, I wrote, "Fire break built. Counselor called. Officers verified. CPS notified. Michael moved the kids for the night. Motion filed. Temporary order granted. Rubber bands in trash." Under that, smaller. "Coco later. Teach Emma how to measure wingspan with string. Show Noah to tie proper knots." If a woman my age can't promise herself small mercies after the big ones, she'll forget why she's fighting. The worst cold isn't outside. It's in rooms where someone mistakes quiet for virtue and fear for compliance. You don't warm those rooms by yelling. You build a break where the fire stops. You let the wind do the rest. Tomorrow will bring phone calls and filings and perhaps a new way for my daughter to say, "You'll regret this." Maybe I will, in the way women regret not keeping their tools where they can find them. But the house didn't burn today. The wind is still up. The strip of raw earth is ugly and true. And somewhere across town, a girl is sleeping with ridiculous socks warming her feet, and a brother is dreaming pelicans with pouches big enough to carry what matters across any river. On hearing day, I polished my shoes until I could count the courthouse lights twice, once in the ceiling, once in my toes. I packed a 3-ring binder with tabs that would make a carpenter proud. House, health, money, kids, court. I added one more, unmarked, that held Emma's pelican drawing in a plastic sleeve. You don't carry luck, you carry purpose. The hallway outside Department 204 had the usual courthouse weather. Women trying to look taller, men trying to sound calmer. A coffee cart doing the Lord's work. Patricia stood at the bench under the wall clock, tie straight, eyes kind, opposing counsel trim, efficient, a briefcase that cost what my first car did, offered a nod and a proposal. "If your client signs a springing power of attorney," she said, "we'll withdraw the guardianship without prejudice." "No signing anything that uses the word springing or simple," I said before Patricia could answer. "Mrs. Sullivan," she tried again, "this is a chance to de-escalate." "Then withdraw with prejudice," Patricia said pleasantly, "and stipulate to our safety rails. Otherwise, we'll let the paper talk." Jessica stood 6 feet away, posture like a plumb line, jaw working. Michael arrived with a folder and a quiet that wasn't compliance. He touched my elbow, small and human. "The kids are in class," he whispered. "We practiced spelling gular at breakfast." Courtrooms look the same everywhere that law tries to civilize weather. Seal above the bench. Wood that forgives fingerprints. Microphones never quite where you want them. The judge was a woman with reading glasses on a chain, and the expression of someone who has seen adults try to hide behind vocabulary. "On calendar," she said. "Sullivan guardianship petition. Temporary orders of contact and corporal punishment, and respondents' request for fees. Appearances. Counsel announced themselves." Patricia said my name. I stood. My heart ticked like the clock we used to test in the lab when we wanted to measure a true second. Opposing counsel led. Briefly, Your Honor, we seek a narrow temporary guardianship based on concerning behavior, impulsive cancellations, financial missteps, isolation. We propose a springing arrangement to protect Mrs. Sullivan and the minor grandchildren from instability during evaluation. The judge looked over her glasses. Evidence. A letter from a medical doctor recommending evaluation and declarations from petitioner and spouse. Patricia rose. Your Honor, we submit the following. A letter from Mrs. Sullivan's long-term primary care physician, finding her oriented and independent. A sworn video recording memorializing capacity made last week, bank records, and a reasonable explanation for the hotel cancellation. Namely that petitioner used respondents' funds to book a trip excluding her. Incident notes from school staff and local officers regarding inappropriate discipline via rubber bands, and a CPS intake reference number. We request denial, plus a narrow protective order. No corporal punishment, no removal from county without notice, no disparagement of any party in front of the children. And we reserve on fees. The judge skimmed. Judges read the way accountants check a bridge. Eyes go first to load-bearing joints. She lifted the online doctor letter between two fingers like a napkin. Telemedicine? She asked. Convenience care? Counsel said too fast. But admissible. Everything is admissible until it isn't, the judge said. The weight is the issue. She turned to me. Mrs. Sullivan, would you step forward? I did. My binder felt light. My knees felt their age and minded their manners. State your full name and today's date, she said. Tell me where you are. I did. Riverside Courthouse, Department 204. Status conference on a guardianship petition. What did you have for breakfast? Toast I did not burn, I said, and the courtroom exhaled an unplanned teaspoon of air. Do you understand why your daughter filed this petition? Yes, I said. She prefers a thermostat she controls for every room she enters. I prefer each person bring their own sweater. The corner of her mouth moved. Ma'am, humor looks bad on some people and good on others. On you, it looks like competence. Please don't overuse it. I won't, I said. Opposing counsel did her job. Mrs. Sullivan, did you cancel a family trip without telling anyone? I canceled a reservation I paid for that. Had 4 names, instead of 5. Did you demand the money back? I asked for a return of funds misapplied. Have you been isolating yourself? I have had cherry pie with officers, lunch with my family, a medical appointment, and 3 walks around my block. If that's isolation, my dance card needs work. The judge held up her hand. Thank you. She looked to the gallery. Is Mr. Davis from Riverside Elementary present? The school counselor stood, small and still. Yes, Your Honor. You are not a party. You may speak briefly and factually. He did. 4 sentences. Saw a wrist with a rubber band mark. Observed flinching at hands. Made a mandated report. Girl is otherwise bright, polite, and loves birds. The words landed like pebbles in glass. Clean. True. Not dramatic. Officers? The judge asked. The pair stepped forward in their everyday clothes, respectful without theater. The woman spoke. We responded twice. House calm, respondent organized, pie good. At school we advised against rubber bands. No emergency removal. And Dr. Chen? The judge asked. Present. She has clinic, Patricia said. But her letter is in the record. The judge sat back. All right, she said, voice even. I am denying the temporary guardianship. Full stop. The room shifted. One group deflating, another bracing. I am granting respondents' proposed temporary orders. No corporal punishment, no out-of-county removal without 72 hours' notice to both parties and the court, and no disparagement in front of the children. If either party violates, it will be addressed promptly. If petitioner wishes an evaluation of her mother's capacity, she may seek it by noticed motion with appropriate medical support, not convenience boilerplate. I caution against weaponizing welfare checks. That said, I am appointing a neutral short-term monitor, call it a parenting coach with eyes, to observe 2 family interactions and report back. Not to police grandparents, to reduce temperature. Opposing counsel tried to find a ledge. Your Honor, supervised contact. The judge raised a rock-steady palm. No, normal contact continues. Monitor is for observation, not gatekeeping. She looked straight at Jessica. Ms. Sullivan-Hayes, you may be absolutely right about what's best for your mother. You may also be wrong. What I can see is pressure, and pressure makes people do foolish things. Stop grabbing for levers. Start using doors. All due respect, she began. Accepted, the judge said, and moved on. Fees are reserved. If I later find this petition was filed as a cudgel, I'll consider them. If I find it was filed in good faith confusion, I won't. Choose your next acts accordingly. Gavel, no. She used her pen like a baton. We're in recess. The hallway did that thing hallways do, when people who wanted a parade get a weather report instead. Opposing counsel was professional. She asked Patricia for the monitor names and promised to confer on a stipulation. Michael stood with his hands in his coat pockets as if he'd strapped them there for safety. Jessica stopped in front of me where anyone could watch. You humiliated me, she said low. In public. I stood up straight, I said. In public. You canceled a trip. You canceled a grandmother. She stepped closer. This isn't over. No, I said. It's begun. With rules. For a second, her face went soft, young the way paper goes weak along a fold. Then she turned and strode away because turning toward me cost more. Michael stayed. I'm sorry, he said. For what? For how long I waited to see what was in front of my face. Vision is a muscle, I said. It strengthens with use. On the way home, Patricia called. We kept the rails, she said. Judge was measured, which is as much as anyone can ask. Expect the monitor to schedule within a week. Good, I said. Margaret, fees. We'll wait. You don't need a wind that tastes like ash. Back at the house, I hung my jacket, set my binder down, and stood for a moment with my palm on the new deadbolt. The house made that small, contented sound wood, folks, when it isn't being asked to hold more than it should. Dorothy wandered over at dusk, the way neighbors do when the air smells like something resolved. She brought a paper sack from the hardware store. They had your preferred sand, she said, handing me a little bag of 30 grit silica like contraband, for the counselor's new timer. You read my mind. I read your lists, she said. Through your window like a criminal. We built the timer at my workbench. 2 mason jar lids, a narrow throat drilled true, sand measured with an accountant's teaspoon. It ran out in 4 minutes and 13 seconds. Close enough to 5 to be kind. Close enough to 4 to be honest. Michael texted after supper. Kids want cocoa Saturday. If schedule allows. Schedule allows. I wrote back. House at 2. Bring mittens. She answered with a single pelican emoji that looked, against my better judgment, like hope. The parenting monitor called Friday. I do living rooms and parks, she said briskly. No interrogations. I watch tone, transitions, and whether kids breathe. We scheduled 2 observations, Cocoa Saturday and next week's library trip. One more thing, she added. I don't do rubber bands, ever. Neither do we, I said, and meant it in more directions than one. Saturday, the doorbell rang at 2 on the dot. Emma barreled in with a measuring tape around her neck like a tailor. Wingspan, she announced. I need string. Noah followed in the snowman socks, which made me absurdly proud. He handed me a notebook I'd put aside for him, and said with a conspirator's solemnity, Cocoa recipe. Cinnamon, I said. Pinch, he grinned. The monitor sat at the table with a clipboard she barely touched. She watched breathing. She watched the moment Emma spilled cocoa and didn't die of shame. She watched the moment Noah hesitated before reaching for the marshmallows, and then decided the room would forgive him even if he took 2. She watched me teach a square knot. Right over left, left over right. Pull smart, not mean. She watched Emma measure my wingspan and declare me a great blue heron going on grandmother. Halfway through, there was a knock. Jessica. Michael had not told her, but in families, news moves like weather. She stood on the porch with a face rehearsed for court, instead of Coco. 5 minutes, she said. Door stays open, I said. Monitor stays seated. She stepped in because she hates looking like a woman who stays on the porch. She watched Noah tie the knot. She watched Emma tape string to the door jamb where we keep the height marks. She watched the monitor watch her. Something in her, small, stubborn, not yet extinct, registered what it looks like when a room warms by itself. Kids, she said finally, voice trying for steady. Get your coats. We're going to the park. Park is part 2, the monitor said. I'm already scheduled to attend, or you can go after Coco, and I'll note it for next time. Either way, she swallowed the word control and changed it to compromise. After Coco, she said. It hurt her mouth. She lived. When they left, the monitor clicked her pen and said, Adult conflict high, child coping good, grandmother supports without triangulation, not perfect, human. She slid a card across the table. My report goes to the court and both counsel. My opinion, for what it's worth, keep the rails. They help everyone drive. That evening, Patricia emailed her report with the kind of subject line that makes a woman sleep. Observed family time. No concerns noted. Recommend respondent. She added a line of her own. Let's land this without burning fuel. I answered with Emma's Pelican, scanned in, and nothing else. Sunday brought the small consequences that feel like big ones. My phone quieter, my kitchen louder, a text from Michael that read simply, Thank you for teaching knots. I replied with a photo of the sand timer and a caption. 4 minutes, 19 seconds. Enough to breathe. Monday brought the larger ones. Opposing counsel proposed a stipulation mirroring the judge's order and punting capacity evaluation to a later question neither of us was eager to test. Patricia agreed with one addition, an apology of record for the welfare check theater. They balked. She held. They produced a line that wasn't an apology but wasn't nothing. Petitioner acknowledges respondent's cooperation and good faith to date. You hang what you can on the studs you've got. The judge signed the stipulation. The guardianship petition stayed technically alive but practically asleep. Fees stayed reserved. The rails stayed in place with real nails instead of thumbtacks. That night I wrote 2 letters in pencil because pencils forgive. One to Emma. Dear architect of wings, your pelican is framed and bossy on my mantel. Bring your tape. We will measure the room for laughter and see if it needs widening. And one to Noah. Dear Chief of Knots, right over left, left over right. Most things worth holding can be held with that. Also true of promises. I addressed the envelopes in block letters. I set them by the door with the new keys, and a small ridiculous sticker of a pelican I'd found in the drawer with the rubber bands that are no longer there. Then I walked the house. The door jamb with pencil marks, the armrest of Robert's chair, the edge of my desk, the deadbolt that turns exactly to its detent and stops. I stood by the window and watched the maple sketch its branches against a sky the color of copy paper. If there was an all is lost in this story, it flirted with me in that courtroom when a word like supervised hovered near the children, and I felt the temperature drop. But the rails held. The plan, lawful, patient, unglamorous, did exactly what plans are supposed to do. It didn't make anyone a hero. It kept everyone from pretending to be one. Tomorrow the monitor will watch us at the library. Next week the court will read and nod and choose not to make a fuss. Sometime after that, I will sit at this table and decide how much of what Robert and I saved should go to warm rooms we'll never visit. Scholarships, socks, sand timers, books that teach a boy you can hold without hurting. I will keep my door open to the width of a sensible heart. Women like my daughter mistake compliance for love until they learn a better word. I can't teach her. I can only draw the line straight enough she can see it from wherever she's standing and leave. A warm house at one end in case she ever wants to walk it. The parenting monitor's second observation took place at the public library in the corner near the aquariums, where the guppies breed like optimists. We did what people do in good rooms. We lowered our voices and widened our attention. Emma measured my reach with string and declared my wingspan slightly less than a heron, slightly more than a pelican with opinions. Noah tied a bowline around the leg of a chair and grinned when it held without biting. The monitor watched breathing. She wrote very little. When we checked out, she thanked the librarian and said to no one in particular, "This is what ordinary looks like when it's working." Her report landed 2 days later. No safety concerns observed. Children relaxed. Grandmother models boundaries and warmth. Mother's tone improved when given clear rails. Rails. That word again, ugly and true as a guardrail on a narrow road. The kind you're grateful for after you scrape it with your mirror and drive on. Anyway, a week after that, Department 204 felt less like weather and more like a scheduled maintenance check. The judge glanced over the monitor's notes and slid her glasses higher on the chain. "Counsel. Where are we?" Opposing counsel stood. "Your Honor, in light of the observations and additional medical documentation, petitioner withdraws the guardianship petition with prejudice. The stipulation on conduct and notice remains satisfactory to all parties." "Good," the judge said, not smiling. "No victory laps. Ms. Sullivan-Hayes, if you mean to keep your children warm, you will not cool every room to prove you have a thermostat." She signed something with a pen that has ended better stories, and worse. "We are done." In the hallway, Patricia shook my hand with that 3-pump precision women over 60 learn from other women over 60. "Fees?" I asked. "Let's let sleeping petitions lie," she said. "There's more dignity in closing the file than in itemizing the scuffle." A certified check arrived the next day. The trip money returned, late fee grudgingly included. The memo line read in Jessica's all capitals, "Per demand letter." I logged it on the legal pad without adjectives and walked it to the bank where the teller wore a dragonfly brooch and addressed me by name, without asking for my ID because we've both been citizens of this block longer than most storefronts. With the check cleared and the rails holding, I did something Robert and I had promised we would do when the time came, and we were brave enough. I drove to the Riverside Children's Education Fund and asked for a room with a table, not a glossy desk. They brought me to a classroom with a whiteboard stained by the ghost of old equations. I signed papers establishing the Warm House Scholarship in Robert's name. Small, renewable, aimed at first-generation kids who take care of younger siblings and still make it to morning classes on time. On the line where it asked, "Intended purpose," I wrote, "To help children feel heat where others only admire straight lines." On my way out, I left a canvas tote with a label, "Sand timers and socks money," and a note authorizing Mr. Davis to quietly buy whatever wool or minutes a shivering child might need without asking permission from a calendar. Bureaucracy is a fine thing, right up until a girl needs warm feet on a Tuesday. Life tilted back toward the practical. I had Dr. Chen's letter scanned and filed. The original rests in a safe metal drawer that smells faintly of oil and arithmetic. I kept the fiduciary named on the power of attorney. Not because I don't trust love, but because I don't ask love to do jobs it isn't trained for. The trust revisions were executed, witnessed, notarized, belt and suspenders, and not one stitch for show. Cocoa Saturdays became a thing a calendar could prepare for. Emma brought a spiral notebook labeled Bird Aerodynamics and drew cross-sections of beaks with arrows for force. Noah learned the trucker's hitch and used it to strap a sled to the roof of a car that never left the driveway. We built a feeder the shape of a small barn and hung it on the maple. Chickadees arrived like polite inspectors, found it acceptable, and signed off in triplicate. One afternoon, Michael lingered after the kids fell face first into picture books. He stood at the sink beside me, drying mugs with a dish towel we've had since before dish towels thought they needed to be funny. "I've asked Jessica to see a counselor," he said. "For herself, not as a performance." "How did she take that?" I asked. "As if I'd asked her to admit anything," he said, which in a way I did. He set a mug down, mouth curving. She didn't say no. That was not triumph. That was weather holding steady. A good forecast for a Tuesday later, Jessica texted. "I'm not doing rubber bands anymore." I wrote back. "Good. Use words." She answered with a single period, which is a start if you squint. When the sand timer I'd built with Dorothy cracked, Emma had measured its flow with a stopwatch and enthusiasm. I brought Mr. Davis a sturdier one, sealed with epoxy that will outlast the building. He put it on his desk beside the jar of sea glass. 4 minutes 13 seconds? He asked. "Close enough to 5 to be kind," I said. "Close enough to 4 to be honest." He nodded at the tote of socks. "You know these are going to disappear." "I hope so," I said. "Warmth should." The officers stopped by once more, out of uniform, with a Tupperware of cookies their sergeant's wife had baked. We ate them at my counter with the quiet boastfulness of people who like their jobs better on days nobody bleeds. When they left, I taped their incident numbers to the inside of my file just because I like order, even after the emergency has gone home. The parenting monitor filed her final report, measured spare, mostly numbers. The judge closed the case with a minute order that said, in essence, everyone behaved sufficiently. That's as close to praise as the law likes to come. It is enough. Spring edged into the yard. The maple learned new green. The feeder emptied faster than it filled. Emma engineered a pulley so Noah could raise and lower it without standing on a chair. We timed it with the sand. We called it good. One Sunday, Jessica knocked and stood on my porch, with her hands in her coat pockets like a girl waiting to be told whether she could come in muddy. The rails said, "Call first," she had. I kept the door open because some rules are for us too. "I brought the kids," she said, "but I wanted 5 minutes." "All right," I said. The legal pad was on the table behind me. It didn't need to hear this. "I didn't see," she said. She looked at her shoes, then at the sky, as if answers lie at the poles of a woman and never in the middle. "I don't like being the bad guy in any room." "You're not," I said. "You're a mother learning not to be a thermostat." She almost laughed. Then she didn't. "I hate that your house feels warm." "Learn from it," I said, not unkindly. She shifted her weight. "I sent you the money." "I saw," I said, "and the petition." She stopped, swallowed. "I shouldn't have gone to war because you drew a line." "You shouldn't have used a weapon when a rule would do," I said. "But you also stopped," she nodded. "I won't ask for my key back." "You don't have to," I said. "Call first. I'll keep the door open as far as the rules allow." She stood there a breath longer, then said, "They're in the car." She waved toward the curb. I waved the family in. Emma barreled past us with string. Noah carried a book about raptors and a grin that reached. We made cocoa. I taught the kids the fisherman's bend and the virtue of leaving a little tail, so knots don't betray you. Emma asked if pelicans cheat. "Only at cards," I said. Noah asked if knots can be mean. "They can be careless," I said. "That hurts just as much." Jessica watched like a woman at a museum reading the placards. She helped Emma tape her new string line to the door jamb and did not correct her, when she declared herself taller than last month by the thickness of a pencil line. Michael caught my eye over the rim of a mug. He didn't smile. He breathed. Sometimes that's the better thing. When they left, the house settled into the small, relieving quiet of a structure no longer overburdened. I washed the mugs and dried them and put them on the shelf where Robert liked his to live. Left of center, near the chipped blue one that makes your lip work a little harder. Then I sat at the desk and took out a fresh legal pad because new paper helps a woman believe in next week's. After storm standing orders, I wrote, keep rails. No corporal punishment, no surprise trips, no disparagement. Warm first, tidy second. Cocoa every other Saturday, unless there's a better reason. Scholarship letters to first recipients. Include a joke about pelicans. Include a check that clears. Doctor yearly. Binder tidy. Keys accounted for. Teach Noah bowline one-handed. Help Emma build a model wing that really lifts. I underlined warm first, tidy second, the way you underline center lines. Firm without tearing. Before bed, I walked the rooms. Door jamb pencil marks. Armrest of Robert's chair. Edge of the desk worn to a soft shine by 4 decades of problem solving. I turned the deadbolt until it stopped exactly at its detent and no further. Outside, the maple drew new lines against a sky the color of paper that has waited quietly for the right words. People like to say, storms cleanse. That's not quite true. Storms reveal. Afterward, you pick up what still matters, dry it by the register, and decide what to rebuild with better joinery. You don't brag about the fire break. You plant grass over it and let children run there without knowing why it's so straight. And you keep a house warm enough that one day, a woman who mistook control for love can learn to take off her coat at the door and stay. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.